hello. Welcome to another episode of Cut to Scene. And today we are going to be discussing a movie which is one of my favorites, a very special movie to me. But before that, let me go ahead and introduce myself. I am Devansh,
I'm Aditya. Sorry. Yeah, I'm Aditya.
and so today the movie that we are going to be discussing is this movie called Baby Driver. But before that, there are some things that we need to talk about. So, something that is very important to understand, which a lot of new filmmakers don't, or I don't know, I mean, we are noobs, right? But this is just something that we feel, is that cinema is more than just the story. Because cinema in itself, if you look at it as a medium, it is different from theater or any other medium for that aspect because it combines different sorts of instruments to make a piece of art. So it combines the visual medium, it captures the audio, and then it combines both of these and the story itself to form a completely new way of storytelling. So it is also important that while we are judging a movie because of its script or by its story, we also should look at the sort of visual storytelling that is going on. What are your opinions on this, V?
So I have always maintained that, movies are much more than the story. The script is only the starting point of it. If the script was the only thing that defined a movie, all books would have been made to, all good books would have been made to all very brilliant films. But that's not the case because there is a certain grammar that the medium of film imposes on itself. For example, my favorite Harry Potter film is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Uh, why? Because it was directed by somebody who I think understands the visual medium very well, Alfonso Cuarón. And for example, you can see his movies like Roma or Gravity or whatever other movies he's made. So, of course, there is a certain part of filmmaking which is encoded in its visual grammar. It's after all, it's a subject, and every subject has its own grammar, its own language. And this visual grammar is, of course, as you rightly said, a lot. I have seen this with a lot of first-time directors. They often forget to use this medium of film, the medium of moving images, to actually tell their stories, and that often sets a lot of first films apart from what from the other films in their filmography. There are some people who absolutely get it right with their first film as well, but it's I think this is one of the most noob mistakes that a lot of people make. So yes, I think visual medium, the visual grammar of a film is very important. It's very important for the filmmaker to put it across in his film, and it's very important for us as viewers to understand that a film fundamentally has a different language from something like a novel or a piece of poetry.
Right. I mean, I agree with most of the points that you said. And so, talking about these other aspects and how they are important to the core of storytelling through cinema, we come to the director of today's movie, that is Baby Driver. And the director is Edgar Wright. Edgar Wright is a director of British origin. He has worked in a lot of British comedies before this, and some of his famous works include the Cornetto trilogy. How else would you introduce him?
Yeah, I think, of course, he's made these Cornetto trilogy films, which are extremely famous. Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and At World's End in that order. He's also made my favorite film of his, which is called Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I remember just being blown out of my wits when I watched the film. The first film I watched by Edgar Wright was, I think it was Hot Fuzz. And what blew me apart was the fact that it was so original and it was something so fundamentally different from anything else that I've ever seen in cinema in any language, right? He has a very distinctive visual style. For example, he concentrates a lot on close-ups. And it's not close-ups as in you would have close-ups in normal films where you just go zoom into the face of a character and just stay there and then cut. Oh, another aspect of his filmmaking that distinguishes himself from everybody else is the pacing of his cuts. I think most of his cuts in especially scenes with very high tension are very, very short. There's this visual style that he's developed, especially in the Cornetto trilogy, where to signify more mundane tasks that a character does, he just cuts across them in, like, let's say in 1 second there'll be around 10 cuts, and that's to signify that the mundane task that a character is doing. I've seen that being used in a lot of Indian as well as other foreign films very lately in the last 10 years, and that I think it owes its origin to Edgar Wright. Of course, I'm not very sure of this, but I think he's the one who made it popular and cool. Of course, there are these, I talked about the fast, sharp cuts. There's also a heavy reliance on colors as a form of a storytelling device in his filmography. And also, rhythm with music and with the rhythm between what is seen and what is heard and what is sold, which again distinguishes himself from a lot of other people.
There is another thing that I have found which is very a signature move of his, which is the cut wherein an object passes through, like, in front of the camera and you switch from one scene to the other. I've forgotten the technical name of the cut. But yeah, so as you rightly mentioned, there are a lot of signature styles and signature things that he does to the script, which brings about this sort of a storytelling experience. So basically, starting from the conception of the idea of this film, back when Edgar Wright was far from being a filmmaker in his early 20s, he had heard the song Bellbottoms, and while listening to the song, he imagined a car chase being picturized over it, and that gave him the idea of making something of this sort. And then it so happened that 20 years down the line, he was able to actually make this sort of a whole movie, and I'm glad that he did. So I'll just proceed by giving you a brief summary of the movie for those who do not remember the exact details. Our protagonist is Baby Driver, as the name says. He is this guy in his early 20s who has this problem that he hears a constant hum in his ears, which is called tinnitus. This is because he was earlier in his life, in his childhood, he was involved in an accident with his parents where he lost both of them, and because of that accident, he's always had this hum. He also is a prodigy in driving, so to say. He has been given names because of the legacies that he has, the sort of, he's like an urban legend. And Kevin Spacey, who is, I don't know, he's like sort of a don.
He's a heist mafia.
Right. So essentially, he has Baby as an employee, as a permanent employee of sorts, because of certain things that have happened in Baby's past. We do not need to get into that. And so the movie passes through a couple of very, very amazingly short car chases, post which we see that Baby has this new member in his life, which is this waitress at this favorite diner of his where his mom used to work. And now suddenly he has this huge love interest, this new person to care about. And amidst all of this, Baby gets involved into the deeper, dirty life of a heist criminal. And within that, things go wrong in one of those heists, and he ends up killing one of his teammates and arguably being the reason behind the death of another teammate. And so another one of his teammates is behind his life, and he has to find a way to get away from him and take the girl along with him to safety. So that is very briefly the plot of Baby Driver, and we'll find out more as we dig into it. Before that, do you have anything to add to the summary?
One thing I didn't know is that he listened to the song and he wanted to make it into a film. And I think we should start our discussion with a dissection or discussion of the first scene and the scene following it. I think the first scene gets a lot of footage the first scene is very popular among people who have watched the film or like Edgar Wright, but I think the second scene does not get as much credit. So I think we should talk a bit about that. So
right. Just before that, one thing that I really wanted to mention because I loved it, and we always are obsessed with the script and the way it's written and the stuff that's written in it, because it is an unread piece of document majorly, and what's written in it is actually what came out of the came out of the writer's mind. So the script starts with this page where we have these couple of lines. The first reads, "You are the music while the music lasts." It's a line by T.S. Eliot. And the second one is, "I was born one dark gray morn with music coming in my ears." And this is by Paul Simon. The next line of the script reads, "Every scene in this film is driven by music." So very clearly up front, Edgar Wright is telling all his crew, his entire, like everyone involved in the film, that listen, hey, this is the way the script is going to be. In fact, one very interesting trivia I found during my research was that they have, for pitching it to the actors, he got the software guy in, and the script was a PDF which had these icons of the music tracks, and they could play the music track while reading it. And so that was a deal maker for some actors. So we start the movie. While we are fading in, we hear this constant hum.
This sound, right?
Yeah, that constant engaged tone in your ear, which is sort of a foreshadowing telling us what our protagonist is suffering from, which is tinnitus. And we land up straight in the middle of the first heist. Yeah, so you could go ahead and break down the scene.
I thought when I watched the first two scenes, I thought this was going to be the greatest movie of all time. And that is how much that scene impacted me. I don't think I'd seen a better action sequence in the history of action sequences that I've seen. Again, a disclaimer, I don't watch a lot of action films. I think most of the action sequences in films, like especially the superhero films that come out of the Marvel and DC universe, are just, very normal. It's just one man beating up another man or one person chasing another person. There's not much to it. But this scene had me blown away, especially because the way it starts. You see a bank, then you see a car, the car stops, the iPod hits play, and the beats of the song, which is in this case Bellbottoms, as you mentioned earlier, fade in. And then you see that all the transitions in the scene are exactly synced to the song. For example, the first four beats introduce the four characters in the car, meaning the people who are, executing the heist. Then these people,
the four guitar strums.
And then they get out of the car together on another beat. They start walking on beat, and they go inside the bank and loot on beat. And all this while we are seeing baby, grooving to this whole music. And what really struck me was how much rehearsal would have been required to get this right. I was blown away by that. And it just gives you a sense of how much, and the interesting thing is, which I found out after reading the script, is that all this is actually exactly word for word, line by line written into the script. And this imagination, and I don't know if how many iterations of the script went to and fro before they went on the location and then storyboarded it or whatever, but it's just so meticulously written, even in the script. Every shot is bloody written into the script, which is, I don't know if that's a good thing to do for a writer. In this case, the writer and the director is the same, so maybe it's fine. But like, I don't know if I would write a film, will I write down every short breakdown in the script, which is one thing that really struck with me while I was watching the film and while reading the script. Yeah, you want to say something?
Right. So Edgar Wright calls it very mathematical, and I agree to some extent. It is indeed very meticulous, as you rightly said. Having said that, I would like to point out that at least the version of the script that I have, there are huge chunks of it which are very, very different from what has happened in the movie, and we'll point it out as and when we get to it. But yeah, some things that I was listening to this podcast, and some things that Edgar mentions which are very, very interesting is that he was very excited about this idea of combining drivers and throwing in choreographers, right? So the choreographer that he had on set was the choreographer of Sia's video on Chandelier. And he was very excited about the sort of creative solutions that they can come up with together. And indeed, that has worked out pretty well. Another thing was that they had an on-set editor at all times, and this was done majorly because they wanted to see the shots that they're capturing and try and see how they would look in the final cut. So that was again very, very interesting. In fact, that catches Jamie Foxx by surprise when they actually, like, when they would shoot a sequence, and then they would be by the end of the shoot they would also be ready with the first cut of the sequence. And Jamie Foxx was pretty taken aback by that sort of a practice,
Right.
because it's not usual, as you said. Again, another thing was that
I mean, like the amount of time that it takes us to edit this podcast
Right.
goes into hours, and I can only imagine doing that on live on set.
the choreographer's name is Ryan Heffington, by the way. So another thing was that they were using multiple cameras because a lot of other films had this Hong Kong style of cinematography, which would use only one shot, and that is what you have, and that is what you depend on. So they would have to use multiple cameras to sort of get the right shot and see how that works out in the editing, because editing here was the key to make the movie the way it is. Another thing is that in a lot of sequences, they would have to fake turns to buy more time for the song. So Atlanta, as a city where this movie is based, would not have that turn if you have to be geographically precise. But then they would have to continue driving straight just so that they can set that drive into the beat of the movie. So they started editing on set. And what I want to point out here in the beginning sequence is that the script also mentions that they show the bank, and the name of the bank is Chase, which is again a foreshadowing instrument. Essentially, as soon as these robbers rob the bank and they come out, they sit into the car, and then we have this brilliant chase sequence that follows. One thing that I found pretty intriguing was that when you post a couple more sequences, when you land up in Baby's house for the first time and when his foster father is looking at the TV screen, there is this brief clipping where Baby's photo is shown on the TV screen in the news, and Baby instinctively changes the channel. Now, if you go back to the chase sequence and you look at the chase sequence very, very carefully, there is this particular turn where the car is going to take a left, and we see a camera flash. So that is essentially the speed cam capturing the whole act, and that is where that photo comes from.
Yeah.
So it has been chalked out to that level of detail, which is just amazing for like a 2-hour piece of work, wherein you even have that down to the you even have that down to the details. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, of course it's amazing for a piece which wholly relies only on such things. I mean, to put things in context, this chase sequence is probably 5 minutes of the film, starting 5 minutes of the film. Of course, the important 5 minutes, but the amount of detailing that has gone in is, I mean, I don't know. It could be worth of like millions of dollars if I
Right.
Yeah, most
Right.
probably. And
One more thing is that there are small visual jokes that Edgar tries to fit in wherever he can. For example, as soon as they sit in the car, Griff, the guy who roughs up Baby later on in the movie, he points forward, but Baby has actually reversed the car already and he drives in reverse. So that's another small visual joke. And so Edgar knows how to use them brilliantly, as you can see in Cornetto Trilogy also. Yeah, so that is something that stayed with me. And I guess let's talk about the next, the opening credit scene that you were fanboying about right now.
yeah, so before that, I would like to talk about the starting the opening scene itself. So there is this, there are these very intelligently written. It's not just an action scene, right? It's not just cars chasing cars. It's it's a story in itself. Like, you could write this thing down on paper, which has been written down on a piece of paper, and it would still make for an interesting read. For example, there's this one scene where there are two cars on the road, with two red cars on the road going in the opposite direction, and Baby's car is trying to escape from the police in another direction, and he sees that, and he senses an opportunity and just takes a U-turn and goes and lands exactly in the middle of those two cars. Now, this is
Because he's also mindful that there's a chopper.
Yes, there's a chopper upstairs, right? And it's so my point is it's so intelligently written. It's not just pretty pictures. It's basically the genius of somebody who's literally penned these things down. And the other thing about the whole chase sequence is the frequency of the cuts. I think the average cut duration would be somewhere between 1 to 2 seconds. I'm pretty sure. And it's so cool that you can see cuts from inside the car and outside the car, from above, from point of view of other people, from the point of view of a as you said, the camera and things like that. And it's a very interesting visual style to see, something that has been never done before. So it takes you aback. So if somebody who's never been exposed to Edgar Wright is watching this film for the first time, they would be absolutely blown away by this scene. And so of course the high frequency of cuts is because there is this track going on in the background which is very fast, and then there's a sense of urgency, of adrenaline rush that is there. And then the chase sequence gets over, and then we turn into a more mellow song, which is again a bloody 5-minute long sequence, which is where the credits roll in, where he starts from his office where all these people are sitting and planning their heist, and then he walks to get the coffee, and that scene establishes a few things for you. That scene tells you that again, the baby is not just listening to music as an instrument for driving. He's also listening to it in his daily life, and it's an inseparable part of him. You see that? I mean, that it's the second time you're seeing it, and that's again Jari, right? I mean, why would a person listen to music all along? And then he's walking. There is the people, crashing into him, and he does not care. He just says sorry and moves ahead. He's trying to cross the road. He's trying to order. There's the scene where which I really fanboy on is there is this he goes into a coffee shop for buying coffee, and then the barista asks him how many coffees do you need, and he waits a second so that he can say it on fucking beat of the song,
and the song goes at that moment. The song goes yeah, and that's what baby says, yeah. And then he orders 4 coffees.
Exactly.
Which in fact in the script is written as 1 black coffee, 1 black coffee, 1 black coffee, and 1 coffee black. Just so that they can set it on beat. He doesn't use this obviously in the movie, but then that's how it's written.
And of course, then there is also there's another foreshadowing element where you see the character of Deborah, who will play a big part in the movie henceforth. You see her in that scene, and it's just like a 1-second shot of her just walking across the road, and baby has her eyes transfixed on her, and he walks out, and she's gone. So there are a lot of these foreshadowing elements which come in, and my point is, in the whole first two scenes, there is not a single line of dialogue spoken apart from and still you get to know so much from the visuals itself. And this is what I was talking about when I was talking about visual grammar. It's using the medium of films, using moving images to tell a story, which is an inseparable part of film as well. Yeah, so that's me going over the section.
Right. Now it's my turn. So essentially, when the first musical number ends, the script reads, and the first musical number is over. That was something. This is just telling the whole crew that this is how we have to make it, so that it leaves the audience with this bang. And then we come into this over the credits scene of Harlem Shuffle, which is playing on, and it's a pretty jazzy tune that's playing, and we see baby dancing along to the tune. So to describe the neighborhood, it just says the song is as funky as the business district is not. So that tells you how huge a contrast there is. And then we see baby dancing along, and along his paths to the coffee shop, we see that there are graffitis on the wall, and there are stickers on poles which have the lyrics of the song written there. So as soon as baby passes through them... What are you saying? You haven't noticed this?
I didn't notice that. What? I didn't notice that.
What? So if baby is passing a wall, there will be a wall which will have yeah written on it, and that is just mind blowing. So now, if you look at the song and like what is happening in baby's life more carefully, what you'll see is, first of all, Edgar Wright uses a lot of flares there are these big blue flashes to show the police, and there are you constantly hear an ATM pin going off somewhere. You hear some other woman shouting out at the top of her lungs on a building.
On beat, that too.
Sorry?
On beat, that too.
On beat.
That's
exactly,
also happening on beat.
Exactly. So all the noise around him is also on beat. When Deborah steps in, while Baby walks into the store, as the camera faces Baby, we see that behind him there is a graffiti which has a black heart. As soon as he turns to check out Deborah again, that heart has turned red. And this is an incredible piece of detail which is there for no reason at all. I mean, of course there's a reason, but then, I mean, and if you look at even before this, when you see the title of the movie for the first time, the title is imposed on this shot of the building where he comes out from, right? And it's a shot from below, which is looking up at the building. And if you look at the building, there is a yellow line right in between the building, which sort of looks exactly like a road, telling you, like, setting the theme for the movie, that this is how the movie is going to be. The first half of his walk before he goes into the barista is very, very smooth, is very choreographed. He meets no bumps there. He crosses the road and points out and like shows the way to a car. In fact, he's that careful. After he's seen Deborah, he's slightly shaken. He comes out, he bumps into a couple of people. The police is noticing him. If you look at the scene very carefully, there's a cop, and the script also says this. There's a beat cop who's not on beat, ironically, and he's walking around. So the cop notices. The cop crosses Baby after he's met Deborah. Another thing is there is this beggar who is holding this board, and the board reads, "Sin can be washed away if you find God." And further into the movie, we see how Baby is a part of a sin, and well, it can be argued on who Baby's God is or is not. So that is why I feel that this is very, very intricately planned, and it just shows you the brilliance of the filmmaker in the initial two scenes. Going ahead, we move into where the actual planning is happening, and Egyptian reggae is blasting through Baby's earphones, and we are inside, and it's time for the doc to divide the money of the loot. So yeah, would you go ahead with that?
So that scene is again, like, that's the first time we hear any human voice in the film about dialogue, and of course that's also, I think that scene is there to again set things up in context. For example, we then, that is the time when we come to know that Baby really has a problem. He has a ringing in his ears. We come to know, we get introduced to the different characters, Doc and the other people in the heist, and yeah, that scene is also there, of course, just to build the characters, which I don't know, and this is my biggest problem with the film, is that it does not pay attention to character building, and that is probably at the expense. The character building comes at an expense of, let's say, these really jazzily written scenes. For example, there's so much time, I think, spent in detailing these visually striking scenes, like the first scene, like the second scene, and the other chase sequences that come forward in the film, that Edgar Wright, who's the lone writer on this film, which is something he's never done in his past films. All his Cornetto trilogy films have been written in collaboration with Simon Pegg, who are at least in two of the films. I don't know if he's there in World because I've not watched it. Oh, great. So then he starred in all the films and he's co-written it. So in all those films, the writing is, of course, very rock solid. In Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which is also he's written with somebody called Michael Bacall, I guess, if I'm remembering it correctly, the writing is rock solid. For example, there is this whole Seven Sins background to Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which I think is detailed and fleshed out and given. The character traits of each of the seven sins is very, very fleshed out and very, very crisp. But not in this film. I, for example, think that there are hardly any characters which are multidimensional, especially the characters of Deborah and Doc, which are the main character. I mean, uh, the two primary characters in this film after Baby's character himself. So I have that very big grouse from the film. I was very underwhelmed by the writing even in the first watch, and that just solidified on the second watch. Now the point is that is the following: if you have such distinctive visual style, which is very different from what anybody has ever seen, and you have a less than average script, does it still qualify to be called a good film? So yeah, I would like to know your thoughts on that.
Okay. So I resonate with the point that I feel that Doc and Deborah are underwritten, but then I feel that they are undershown more than underwritten, in the sense that the script has slightly more has slightly more flesh in it for Doc and Deborah, but for some reason or the other that does not come out on film. There are a couple of scenes where they're there and they're not. I feel that Deborah's character was for some reason dumbed down. I don't know why. And used more like an instrument. But at the same time, having said that, I feel that there was significant work done on the characters of Buddy as well as Bats. I mean, people who are antagonists, people who are arguably against, are going to be against Baby in some way or the other. About this scene specifically, and okay, first of all, addressing the broader point that you made, is one of the elements that goes into making the film. So if you have a great script but a bad execution of it, and if you are calling that a great movie by any means, then a mediocre script with great visual storytelling also deserves to be called a great film, because film in itself is more than just the story, as I said. So in my opinion, I think it's correct, and I think the story covers what it means to cover, which is the story of Baby Driver. I agree that I feel that Doc and Deborah could be more fleshed out, but I don't know. There must have been some reason or the other, because I feel that it's not negligence, because it has been looked into. I mean, the script is fairly detailed in that sense, but somehow it just does not show up.
Yeah, so I mean, I took Doc and Deborah just as examples. I disagree with you that even the villains were written well, because we know absolutely nothing about Bats. We know absolutely nothing about the other character. What was his name again?
Buddy.
About the Buddy and his wife, Darling. We know absolutely nothing about him. Now, about coming to Baby, we know that there is a conflict in his life about his mother, but we never get to see, or we never get to hear, or we never get to even get a sense of what relationship he had with his mother. It's never ever given in the script. We don't know how he met his foster father. We don't know why he's enchanted with Deborah. For example, the first meeting scene of Deborah and Baby, I found it to be very jarring. I don't think anybody at a restaurant would do that, and I thought maybe that's just a culture difference, and maybe people in America, Atlanta, in a big city might do that. But then I asked a few of my friends and they said, no, that does not happen. So I thought that was just a very convenient writing device. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's just too convenient. It feels to me that there was not a lot of thought that went in. Of course, there's a lot of thought that went in deciding, for example, what color Baby is going to wear when he's on the date, what color Deborah is going to be wearing, what colors they wear later in the film. But I think all that is very meticulously detailed out. I just thought that these points in the script, which were meant as an exposition of the characters' past, present, and future, were not very fleshed out, and that is why I didn't. After watching every after watching every Edgar Wright film, I have had this 1 hour of thinking about that film. With Baby Driver, that thinking about was just restricted to the first 2 scenes and just maybe a few other scenes. And I am a person who does not really look at this.
But given what you're saying, it's a 1 hour 53-minute film. Do you think adding all that exposition would have increased it by an undesirable 30 minutes?
One thing, I think it could have been easily edited out down to 2 hours, whatever. But the point is, I think apart from, giving exposition, of course, there are two parts of what I said. There is one part where there is no exposition being given, and there's the other part where the exposition that is being given is done in a lazy way. Even if no exposition is given, even if what exposition you are, whatever you're showing on screen, if that is not done in a lazy way or in a convenient way or in a way which we have seen before, that would have made the film more interesting, and it could have literally been one of the best films of all time. I think.
So, going ahead with this scene, I'll just highlight some points that I wanted to talk about. So, as I said, I felt that Doc had been written better into the script, in the sense that Doc seems to be have more depth in the film. Moving on, there is this point wherein they discuss why they call him baby, because they're still waiting on his first words, which is again a funny wordplay thing. When we are talking about jokes, then because these two are making out and Griff is going on and on about them, what Buddy asks him is, where do you get off? And then there is a perfectly timed cue to the lifting, and then he says, here. Again, there's another foreshadowing element wherein Buddy says that next time Doc calls, don't pick up. And that would have been the ideal case. Had Buddy not picked up the next call, he would not be involved in any jobs further down the line, and he wouldn't have landed in the soup that he did. So that was pretty well framed, in my opinion. Moving on, now this is the first time we see Baby in his house with his foster dad. It seems like a very calm, peaceful atmosphere to be in, and this foster dad is continuously watching TV. One thing that I found really good was one aspect of Baby that they were trying to cover was that Baby does not have original lines. Baby as a person is sort of an introvert. He does not speak a lot. He lets his driving do the talking. That is what he's good at. And for the rest of the time, he has his music to give him company. So since he does not speak a lot, he's not very interactive. All the lines that he uses are from things that he hears on the TV. So for example, the scene starts with this boy singing, "You are so beautiful." He uses that line. The next, and while he's switching channels, the next is a scene of John Krasinski saying, "They grow up so freaking fast, don't they?" And this is the line he uses in front of the teller in the post office. And then there's another line from Monsters Inc., of course, which Kevin Spacey catches him doing. You and I are a team. Nothing is more important than our friendship. So he uses all these lines, which tells us something about Baby, that probably he's not that well versed with a lot of lines. Again, if you go back and look at when Deborah asks him where he is going to take her, he says we can go to Bacchanalia because it's the finest wining and dining that there is, which again is a line that he's heard from Buddy and Darling. So yeah, some interesting points there. Seeing his house, understanding that okay, there is this another life that is dependent on Baby, and who does not fundamentally agree with the way Baby is getting the money for the house. One thing that I found interesting was when Baby says, "One more job and I am done," and Kevin Spacey corrects him to say, "One more job and we are straight," which is just to tell Baby that look, it's not like you're done. I'm gonna reach out to you later too. One question that I have is, why does he give Baby the gloves? Why do you think he gets those red gloves that he does?
Yeah, so again, like that's one of the one thing I think is also again a lazy writing choice, because I didn't find any meaning to it apart from to give some reason why later in the film he would try to save Baby and get himself killed. So there is some degree of affection that Doc the person has for Baby, and he thinks of him as a son or whatever. But Doc the heist mafia Don does not have any affection for him, as you can see that he wants him for every job, and he doesn't want to do. So again, I sort of felt that I really thought about this the gloves thing, and I thought it was just again another.
Actually, I get your point now, because even in the end, when Baby is out there to get his mom's cassette, the last cassette back, the Doc is refusing to give it to him, and he agrees only when Deborah shows up, and then he's like, "I too was in love once." And that's a very quick resolution to an argument like that, and in a heated moment like that. and suddenly he gets protective about baby, and he's like, "You go, I'll handle all of this," which is sort of weird. Another jarring feature that I found was that when they have done the first division of the money and they're stepping out, there is this dialogue that Doc says, which we hear over everything else, and he says, "Now I get no pleasure in taking candy from baby." Why has Doc suddenly transferred into being the narrator, which is just irregular, right? It's it's pretty jarring because how does he go into being a narrator suddenly? So I get your point that probably there were a few misses when it comes to writing. Go ahead.
Again, like, of course, there are these big problems with Doc's character. There are also these problems with Deborah's character. I mean, why does she want to run away? Why does she fall for baby in the first place? There is no motivation for that. There's no building up of their love. There is no conflict in their love. It's just the fact that they want to run away.
I think they showed it in a very traditional pick-up lines wala way, wherein baby just acted cute and charming for like a couple of moments and that's it. And then they have that laundromat scene, of course, which is not written in the script for some reason.
Yeah. We were talking about how visually beautiful the film is. The laundromat has all, you can see that all the primary colors are there in the laundromat washing machines. And so my point is, sure, you can write all these things into the script. You can put all these things on screen. You can take these foreshadowing elements. You can put in Easter eggs, and which has been a very typical quality of all Edgar Wright films. I just think these things do not hold up unless given a reason to. You gave me a lot of Easter eggs. You can say, "Oh my god, oh cool, these things are really cool. It's really nice that the director put this in." In all of Edgar Wright's previous films, I thought all these Easter eggs were justified, especially in Scott Pilgrim, because it was based on a comic book movie. There's a lot of fans and things like that. In this movie, Edgar Wright did not give me enough reason for them to be justified. And that brings me back to,
essentially enough payoff. Enough payoff. You didn't get enough payoff for the building up.
Yeah, I mean, like, I had so much else bad to think about the film that I forgot to think about what was good about the film. That's the thing. I mean, it has a brilliant first scene. It has brilliant car chases. It has brilliant visual style otherwise. But I mean, as we started the podcast by saying, a film is not just the script, but a film is not just the visual style as well. You can't just forget about the script and building your characters, because the story needs to have some substance in it. You need to feel for what the characters in the film, or the setting of the film, or the reason why these visuals, these breathtaking visuals add to the film, which I didn't feel that much. For example, there are a lot of these conspiracy theories or theories going on the internet that this film was actually not real. It is not set in a real world. I don't know have you read about that?
No, theories? I haven't.
Okay, so for example, the reason that people give to say that this film is not set in the real world is, for example, you remember that there's a dreamy sequence where Deborah and baby there's this the dream type sequence which is in black and white, and then in the end when he comes out of the prison, it's still black and white, and then it changes to color, right? So a lot of people have taken that to mean that it's the whole film is a dream.
I have read the theory wherein they say that the last part is unreal because baby was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Like, the movie shows that, okay, he gets out on a parole or something. But yeah, I get that argument. I feel that it's set in older times.
Right. Oh yeah, that's one thing I'd like to speak about, because again, the time is not evident from any of the frames, right? I mean, he still used cassettes. It's probably not the current. The movie was released in 2017. It's probably not that time, because the iPods that are shown are probably of a much earlier origin and things like that. So sure, that is one way to look at it.
Also the phones. They're using flip phones.
Yeah, they're using. Oh, of course, they're using phones which have these flip wala phones, right? I don't buy that theory, and my reluctance to buy all that is mainly because I was not given enough meat in the script for it to show. I mean, like, I can give you an example of a good theory, right? For example, let's say Inception, the last scene of Inception. Was he in a dream or was he not? Now, the whole movie has built it up to that point where you can actually now go back home and think. You have a lot of meat in your head to think, Arey, oh my god, yeah, how can I figure out whether this was real or not, But I just don't think this film, at least in my head, deserves such theories to be brought.
Fair enough. I get your point. So moving on, we see that baby's watching this TV show where he gets all his lines from, and then he goes into making that tape, and where we understand what baby's sort of obsession is with music, and to what extent it is that he's also making these mixtapes out of everything that is happening around him all the time, which is very, very interesting. And then we see this first flashback of baby, wherein we see that accident actually happening. So all of this happens, and then we land up at the diner where baby meets Deborah for the first time. Baby is acting cute, cheesy, awkward, which is all a teenage flirting sort of a conversation would be. One foreshadowing element is again that whole backdrop of the diner is set to this the wallpaper is that of this couple driving away into the desert, which is the same backdrop that we see on the postcard that she sends him when he's in jail later on in the movie. So that's when he discovers this new song for himself, and they have this interesting conversation about how people have songs about them, like on their names, and Deborah has only 2 of them, and baby has this abundance of songs. And later on when she even that part of the script, I feel, is half cooked, in the sense that Bats keeps insisting that his actual name is Bats, but then Kevin Spacey tells him that no, it's Leon. And baby reinforces this even at the coffee shop and at the other places, that his name is Baby, whereas he does not need to do that. I mean, one reason why you would maintain a second alias is so that your companions, your fellow heist mates, so to say, do not know your true identity. But then why do you extend that to the true world?
Right. Yeah. I mean, one explanation is, I don't know, maybe a lot of musical artists tend to be, like to be called by their stage name and not their real name. For example, I hardly know anybody who calls Eminem whatever his real name, Marshall Mathers, right, or Jay-Z, Sean Carter, right? So one reason could be, of course, that. A lot, this is just not in the rap world, it's also in the rock world or whatever. A lot of musical artists actually go under their pen name or whatever, stage name. So, yeah, speaking of musical artists, there's this artist called Flea. He was the bassist for Red Hot Chili Peppers in one of the films.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's another interesting wordplay joke that Edgar has included into the script. Eddie knows, that's a knows, basic whatever, something that he says. That's funny, and that artist was actually in the movie, and he enjoyed the script so much that he wanted it. So that's interesting. The job that they go for here with this new company of Bats, Eddie knows, and JD is pretty interesting, because we see a couple more elements of Baby's personality during this job. First up, we see Baby's obsession with timing and with music, wherein he has started Neat by the Damned, but then the song is not timed well, because the gang ends up having a fight amongst themselves. Right. And because of that, he then stops them from exiting the car. He restarts the song and then says yes 5 seconds into the song. So that is his obsession. Second thing is his how he tries to avoid violence as much as he can, because even when he knows that the gang is going to get violent with that guard, he drives ahead so that his vision is blocked. He's lost in his song, and then precisely after counting a particular period of time, he drives back to see that guy has fainted and he's on the sideway. So before this robbery scene, another exposition that we have is how Baby is very, very particular about the details and how he catches all of them.
Yeah, I mean, not just the guard painting. There is this scene where, I mean, this is when Bats, I think, is trying to take aim at somebody, and then he just drifts the car away from there, and so hence not giving Bats the aim. So of course there is that. All that is written in to most probably say that baby also baby does not belong in this world. He is just here by some accident of fate, which he is.
Right. So now, very interestingly, the behind the scenes trivia for this is that Edgar Wright had written this song into the script, but then he didn't know that it would run out. While the cinematographer or some member of the crew had warned him, rightly so, that listen, cars are heavy. You have written this stunt for say 1 second, but a heavy car would need more time to actually film it out. So you would run out of song. And when they actually found that they did, what Edgar did was they incorporated this bit into the screenplay, wherein he backs up the song so that they buy that much time for Baby, and then he goes on ahead again. This also goes to show that had this been the perfect scenario, because there are fuck ups in this current routine of theirs, had this been a perfect scenario, Baby would have gotten away within the song's duration. But because of JD's fuck up, which then leads to his death, because of his fuck ups, Baby suddenly has to rewind the song and then go ahead. So that was a good creative solution to this problem, I feel.
Yeah, I think I agree. I didn't know that. For example, you said about this behind the scenes trivia. I didn't know this, and if they came up with this on spot, it's actually a smart thing. And yeah, I mean, it does go on to say that there is some. I mean, that is the first real time, at least that we know of, that when Baby has fucked up, or the whole heist has gone bad, and though he still manages to save the
I mean,
day,
things are shaken up after that, because after that, when he goes for the coffee run, we hear the same Harlem Shuffle that we did initially, but then it's a faster cover of Harlem Shuffle, and Baby is not enjoying that walk like he used to before. So things are shaken up for Baby also. Post this is the most important foreshadowing sort of dialogue for me in the screen, in the whole movie, wherein Bats tells Baby that the moment you catch feelings is the moment you catch a bullet in this sort of a job. So yeah, so we were talking about the first heist where problems occurred for Baby, and this was the first heist with Bats also. Soon after this heist, we realized that JD has been killed, and we also realized that that's how the stakes are. That's how high the stakes are. Even a small mistake by you can get you killed in this sort of a scenario, in this environment. And so Baby is responsible for going and dumping JD's body, which is transitioned with a brilliant match cut where we see Baby standing in the basement, and as soon as Doc's car passes, we see Baby in the junkyard, and he listens to this brilliant soundtrack while getting the car dumped, and then we move out. And what are your opinions on how this progresses?
And yeah, I just think the movie loses it. I mean, of course, still the first half an hour, 45 minutes of the movie are still okay, but it sort of loses its way towards the end, is what I felt, and that therein lies all my problems. None of the, I mean, very few of the characters get proper closures. And for example, in the third act, the movie just becomes like another Fast and Furious movie, for instance, the recent Fast and the Furious movies. It's just there to there's some villain who's chasing the hero, and he just kills the villain, and that's it. I didn't read much into the movie after that point.
Right. Okay. But let's just back up a little bit and like there are a few things that I'd like to mention. So there is this exchange between Baby and Deborah before he like just at the point where he gets to know her name, and at that point Baby very cutely mentions the name of this artist, and he goes Trex instead of T-Rex, which is again a nod towards baby's whole character of being an introvert, of being away from, like the sort of social milieu which would have set him to, like, which would have otherwise, in which other case he would have known the artist's name, which was a pretty common name. And then we proceed to the laundromat scene, and as you said, we go to Bacchanalia and all of that. In the script, although it is mentioned that post he meets Deborah and gets to know her name, and the whole song sequence and everything happens. But anyways, and then they go into the post office. In the post office, baby is without his earphones, without his glasses, all of that. He's taken them off to appear less suspicious. And at that very point, he's off his game. He's totally off his game. He's trying to count the number of cameras, and thanks to the nephew, Doc's nephew, thanks to the kid, he's able to get through that whole experience, and he helps him out in that. So that is the first time we see baby actually thrown off, or actually sort of, off his game. And there again is this important foreshadowing where the lady teller and baby are talking about Dolly Parton, and she says that everybody wants happiness, nobody wants pain, but you can't have a rainbow without a little rain. Which, when you compare with the last scene of the movie, where baby is exiting jail and the black and white transitions to a color, you see a bright rainbow behind them. And so it sort of hits back that, okay, that probably this is the sort of thing that she was referring to. There were a few interesting things that I came across while listening to a lot of interviews. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, so since you had asked me how the movie progresses, I would also like to bring back my earlier point of, convenient writing choices, is when they leave the basement where the shootout has happened, with where Bats has just shot people, rightly suspecting them of being the police. They decide to stop at the exact restaurant where Deborah works. That's just a very, very convenient writing choice, right? There is no reason why they had to stop there. It's not adequately justified. It seems like it is just done so that they can have that face off there, where baby's true identity can slowly be started to reveal to Deborah. That seems to be the only reason why that is put in the script. What do you think about that?
Okay, I do not remember if the diner was shown while they were driving up to the place, in which case it would have been a bit more believable that, okay, this diner falls into the route of the place, so we know that. I think there could have been like a line or two about how the diner falls in the route that they are taking. Maybe that would have helped. Another thing is, it is also important because that is the first time the characters in the movie, the other people who are with him in the heist, who are accompanying him, understand baby's takes. They understand that, okay, Buddy gets that, okay, this is a diner that he can come back to because the baby is interested in the girl who's serving here, which he does later on in the movie. So that part is important, is what I feel.
I agree with you that it serves as a justification for a scene that comes later in the film towards the end, which is one of the more important scenes in the film. But I just think it was just a very convenient choice to just put them right in the way, and Bats asking baby to go into that exact restaurant. It's just too much of a coincidence in my head. Yeah.
I agree with that. Like, there's a problem with the suspension of disbelief structure there, is what you're trying to say, I guess.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
I agree to that point. So yeah, so again, the script tries to tie in some loose ends. For example, when we are talking about when baby is gonna leave the basement on that very night, on the night before the final heist, and it is resolved with baby saying that I'm gonna be your driver, which is again not coherent. I mean, if you are doing a job which is as serious as a big heist, and you find one of your heist mates is not, up to speed, then you'd work on that and you'd sort of devise an alternate plan or something. I don't know. Another thing is also that let's talk about the tequila scene, because I feel it is very very well choreographed again. That is one scene where they move in and they have this very nice metaphor of the butchery being played out of the place where they can get bacon. The whole scene is set up pretty well, and they go in, and it starts getting suspicious at this very moment, because Bat suddenly hands Baby a gun, and as per their understanding, there was no need of a gun there, right? And it's another example of how beautifully they have edited to the beat. So that is another scene that I thoroughly enjoyed and appreciated. And
Yeah, that scene is very well edited. It's the cuts are just right on point, right? I mean, from the way it starts till the end, when all people are killed and everything is done.
another thing about the whole shooting of the movie, in fact, that I would like to comment on is how 95% of all car chases and all car sequences were actually shot in the car and not using green screen. And so Edgar Wright first of all says that he used an actual car because if you otherwise, what's the point of shooting a car chase film? Which makes sense, because and he also says that, I mean, the audience are in it for the thrill, not the spectacle. And you only feel the thrill when you feel like you are in the driver's seat or you are in the passenger seat and you're with them. So whenever an actor is holding the oh shit handle, the handle above the window, that's out of actual anxiety or actual worrying, and not just to show, not acting.
So I don't know if you remember, but a lot of these turns, especially in the first scene, I remember the first scene very well. So a lot of these turns are not signified by the car actually turning, but they're signified by the people in the car actually swaying
Right.
to the opposite end where the car is turning.
Right.
And that's something that I've not really seen in films before this. The turn is always, because the turns are the most adrenaline-inducing shots, because that's where you get the thrills. And but then Edgar Wright does not use these things to create the thrill. He creates thrill especially in that scene through the human emotions and through human swaying.
But at the same time, Ansel was taught stunt driving and he knew how to do all the moves, so that up in the pod, when the actual driver would be moving, he would know exactly what he would do to get the desired effects. So that is also appreciable. Another thing is that they had this special sort of an equipment to shoot this, and they generally do it. I forget what it is called. But then one improvisation that they did was Edgar actually sat there, and that instrument would get hot of all the driving, and it was attached to the vehicle. And then it had this very odd setup wherein Edgar wanted to sit on it so that he could instruct the actors about what to do, because the actors couldn't hear him otherwise over all the action. So he would just act out whether he wants them to be more intense or whatever he wants them to be. So that sort of goes into, say, the amount of dedication that they put in and the sort of planning that they've done for all the car chases.
Yeah, there's no doubt at all that this thing requires immense hard work, not just by one person, but by a whole crew who's up to it, right? You know, who's as talented and as hardworking and has the same vision as what the director has. Otherwise, things like this would be very, very tough.
And that is what goes into making the movie what it is, right? So then we see this whole fallout between the gang. In the script, there is a lot of back and forth in this part between Bats and Buddy and Darling, to show that there is a lot of conflict there. But then it leads, it does not lead anywhere per se.
Right. So I don't think I read this part of the script, but then that would make sense, because again the conflict between Bats and Buddy is just created by one line, by Darling telling him that he looked at me.
Right. Look. Yeah. That's in the movie, but in the script there is more to that conflict.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
It makes sense that it's there in the script,
right?
Because it's completely missing from the film, and you almost feel that there's something really amiss.
Right. So then this is where Baby has gotten emotional over the waitress in front of the gang, and this is where they have identified that, okay, this is a weak point that we can get onto. And since the start of the day, we can sense that something is wrong. There is cloudy weather, which is sort of unusual for that area in that time, and then we have like a couple of raindrops. Baby is not feeling up to the game. Uh, it feels sort of redeeming, wherein Baby drives forward and kills bats. The character, but that is where the exact fuck up starts, because had Baby just escaped from there, they probably could have gotten through, but then Baby's conscience made him do this, because of which we are now facing the
Right.
consequences. Yeah,
Right, and I don't know how, but this might be jumping a bit forward, but I really like the one chase sequence after that, which is the on foot
on
chase
foot
sequence.
chase sequence.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's beautiful. Very, very nicely constructed, especially the interior of the mall. Though I just don't. So he goes into this mall and he puts on clothes, but then like that's just for nothing. As in, because these people start following him anyway. Uh, I thought that was a bit. I don't know. I didn't get the motivation for that, because that just took off a bit of tension from the scene, from otherwise, which was a very tense scene. In my head, that took off a bit of tension from the whole thing, that he goes and starts changing, but you would expect that the chase would resume in a more higher in a higher tension scenario, but then that doesn't happen. It's just the tension just remains the same.
right. It's sort of detailed in the script, in the sense that so exactly what happens is, because Baby has stolen that clothing, the tag on the clothing trips off the store's alarms, and that is why the police get notified. Now the police are running, and Baby runs into this electronics store, and the whole chase continues. At which point he clashes into Buddy and Darling, and which leads to the ultimate death of Darling. Now, one thing is that during this sequence, we see multiple times at this point, even later at the point where the final face off is happening, that Buddy's eyes are shown in red light, which is a throwback to the statement that Darling made to Bats in the diner, where she says, "When he sees red, you see black." Yeah, as in at that point of time, you have nothing else to do but die. I mean, so Buddy sees red when Darling dies, and then he comes out with his guns all blazing at the cops and at Baby too.
Yeah, I mean that setup, like that set piece is pretty interesting. To again, it's as well choreographed as the one in the start is choreographed. But yeah, I mean, but after that we see Baby lose his iPod for the first time, right? And so that's a bit that's one of the only portions in the film where you do not have a soundtrack in the background.
Right, right. And then we have that brilliant scene where he gets into the car of an old woman, but then he has to wait till the perfect track comes on.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
Exactly. On the radio.
Right. Now, this whole chase sequence is actually a bit more enhanced in the script, and then he drives to the diner where he ultimately meets Buddy again.
Buddy and Deborah.
Yeah, that's an incredible scene of tension. The way they have built it
Yeah, the one inside the thing, right?
inside the diner, right?
Yeah, it's really well done.
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah. And at that very moment, then they drive off from there to land up to the place where Doc is, because he has to get his mom's cassette back. Now, in the script, what happens is Buddy is already there, and Buddy kills Doc beforehand.
Okay. Oh, okay. So he does not get to meet Doc at all.
Yes, exactly. He does not get to meet Doc at all, and he has not taken this one. He has not taken Deborah along with him. He has escaped from the diner alone, and Buddy has chased him from there to reach Doc's place. So Deborah wasn't involved in the death of Buddy at all in the script.
Oh, yeah, that explains. Because see, I frankly, so for example, he asked Deborah to come run away with him,
Right.
at that point, and I don't know, I don't understand why she would, because see, before that point, they have never had a conversation about him being in this profession.
Exactly.
And then just on his ask, she just runs away with him,
Right.
which is not given enough. I mean, this ties
Uh-huh.
back into my point
Uh-huh.
about Deborah's character not being given any
Right.
flesh at all.
Right. So that is very well tied back in the script, wherein what happens is after all of this is done, after Buddy is dead, Baby comes back to the cafe to pick Deborah up, and because he's looking the way he's looking off after all of that gruesome shit, Deborah is sort of suspicious. So she leaves a note that says "help" on the diner counter and then walks out. And then Baby asks her to get away with her. I mean, go away with her.
Mm-hmm.
And then Baby drives them onto that bridge where ultimately he's arrested by the police.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And then probably we can have it tying back to this, to the logic that, okay, to the theory that, okay, probably that whole thing of him coming back and meeting Deborah again is a dream sequence. Yeah, so that sort of ties back pretty well. And yeah, so that's the entire plot of the movie majorly. Reasons why you should watch this movie is purely because of the thrill of the car chase. If you and because just it is once in a, like, it is very rare that you find a movie that is so particularly focused. And in fact, the background score of this movie was planned before the movie was written, in the sense that there were very few changes that Edgar Wright had to make later on. And so and it is very rare to get this sort of work, and so that is why the movie is a recommended must watch, according to me at least. What are
Yeah,
your...
I agree. I think it's a very well made film. It's so again, it's my opinion is that you should watch all kinds of films, not just films. So I think it's a must watch, mainly because of its very distinctive visual style. But of course, you can get that visual style not exactly the same, but you know, variations of this in Edgar Wright's other movies. But I think Edgar Wright's filmography is a must watch for anybody who's growing up and trying to get into, or not trying to get into, but you know, has started watching different kinds of cinema. I think if you really want to watch one director's work who has really changed the way, or has really looked at cinema in a very different light, then I think Edgar Wright comes on top of that list.
Right, and it's as masala as it gets. I mean,
oh yeah, of course,
yeah,
of course. I mean, in fact, all of Edgar Wright's films have been very what do you say? Has a lot of these pop culture mainstream references, a lot, and I don't think anybody can classify it as a parallel art cinema. Of course not.
Correct. So yeah, so brilliant film to watch. Baby Driver, an amazing piece of work by Edgar Wright. That's it for this episode of Cut to Scene. It was a very good experience going through Edgar's body of work and trying to understand how he makes films, the way he uses a lot of visual grammar to come up with the sort of work that he does. The good news is that we are now available on almost all the podcast platforms. Could you just highlight the platforms that we are available on?
Yeah, so on the day of recording, which is June 10th, we are available on Anchor, Breaker, Castbox, Apple, Pocket Cast, Spotify, Radio Public, Stitcher. The only thing we have not gone live on yet is Google Podcasts, and I think that will also be there pretty soon. So yeah, we are pretty much there on every podcasting platform. If there's a podcasting platform that you use and you don't find us there, you can maybe write to us and we'll make it available there as well.
Yes, and of course we have to mention that we are now also live on YouTube. The channel's name is Cut to Scene, and you can find us easily. So yeah, log on there, listen to the podcast, maybe drop in a few comments. We could always use your feedback for what we are trying to do here. Again, it was an immensely fun experience doing this episode, and I personally enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, thanks for listening. We really, as Devan said, we really need your feedback. Please give us feedback on our Twitter, Facebook. Okay, we don't have a Facebook, but on our Twitter, Instagram, you can find us there on @cuttoscene. You can also watch our videos on YouTube and also leave comments there for feedback. You can follow me at Adi Vijay Kumar on Instagram and at also goes by V on Twitter. You can follow Devansh on @Devnash on Instagram and Twitter. And please keep listening. We are coming out with episodes every week. Yeah, thanks. Stay well, stay safe, and enjoy. Bye.
I'm not talking about your pigtails, but I'm talking about your sex appeal and the